Have you ever paused in a forest so ancient that the air itself seems to hum with stories long forgotten? You step lightly over moss-damp roots, feeling the soft give of the earth beneath your boots, as mist curls over the Anduin like a pale silk ribbon, and the distant hoot of an owl blends with the low rustle of leaves. Here in Greenwood the Great, shadows twist into shapes that might be friendly, or might just be curious about the intruder in their domain, and you probably wouldn't survive this without Radagast's cautious guidance. The scent of pine and damp earth fills your nostrils, mingling with a faint aroma of wildflowers and something older, something almost magical, like the memory of a song sung before the world was young. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. You notice a faint trail of feathers scattered along the path. Small birds with bright eyes flit nervously, pausing to regard you, as if judging your intent. And you can't help but smile at their earnest vigilance. I'm really curious. From which part of the world are you watching this video? Write your country in the comments. Let's see how far this little story has traveled. Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You follow a narrow, twisting path where sunlight barely touches the forest floor, and you sense the pulse of life in every leaf and branch. Legends tell that Radagast the Brown once lingered here, speaking softly to creatures and trees alike, and some say he learned more from the chirp of a sparrow than most wizards learned from books. A squirrel pauses mid-leap, tail twitching, and you realize you are intruding on a society much older than any you have known. In fact, dwarves once believed that squirrels could guide travelers through hidden forest tunnels, a notion many scholars now dismiss as quaint folklore. Yet some maintain it had practical truth. The wind shifts, carrying with it a whisper of a forgotten language, a dialect of elves rarely heard outside the deepest glades. And you wonder if Radagast once sang here to call it forth. You stumble upon a hollow tree, gnarled and vast, and a faint glow emanates from within, as if the wood itself remembers some ancient light. You pause to listen. The rustle of leaves, the distant caw of a raven, and the subtle hum of magic that refuses to be named. A minor elvish belief suggests that if you touch the bark with reverent fingers at dawn, you might glimpse a vision of what the forest has witnessed over centuries: battle, celebration, and migration. But only a brown wizard would dare such intimacy. You notice a faint scratch across the trunk, runes so eroded that only a patient mind could decipher them. Some claim these were Radagast's notes on healing herbs. Others argue they mark a pact with the forest itself. As you move, you feel a chill, the kind that speaks not of cold but of awe, and you chuckle at the thought that even Radagast occasionally misread the signs, confusing a fox for an emissary from Rivendell. The sun dapples through the canopy, casting fleeting golden shapes across your path, and you step carefully, mindful that every crackle of twig might echo in the woodland halls. You recall, with a faint grin, that in one tale Radagast attempted to teach a hedgehog to deliver messages, a charming disaster that left the forest alive with amused chatter for weeks. Somewhere ahead, a brook babbles with crystalline clarity, carrying reflections of leaves and sky. You pause, dipping a hand into the cool water, feeling history and story swirl together in the current. Scholars debate whether Radagast's intimate understanding of the forest was innate or taught, some claiming Gandalf himself envied the brown wizard's skill, while others insist it was merely eccentricity guided by persistent kindness. And through it all, the forest seems to lean closer, inviting, testing, whispering secrets that perhaps only you or Radagast himself could ever hope to comprehend. You step quietly along a hidden trail, the kind of path that twists and curls beneath Greenwood the Great, where moss blankets the ground so thickly it softens your footsteps, and shafts of sunlight pierce the canopy in fractured gold. Each bend reveals a scene more secret than the last. Clusters of wild mushrooms forming natural patterns, birds with feathers so iridescent they seem painted, and the occasional flash of a fox's tail disappearing into undergrowth. Radagast moves ahead with measured calm, staff tapping lightly against the earth, guiding you along routes known to few, and marking each subtle change in the wind or rustle of leaves as if reading the forest's own script. You notice that some flowers here open only at dusk, releasing scents that mingle honey and earth in a way that sharpens your senses and quickens your pulse. And you realize that even Radagast pauses to inhale, acknowledging the forest's own breaths. A curious woodpecker hops nearby, seemingly inspecting your presence with mild suspicion, and you can't help but chuckle at how the wizard converses with it, in a language half-whistled, half-spoken, as though trading news of the forest's happenings. You follow a narrow creek that glints like silver in patches of sun, the water bubbling over stones worn smooth by centuries, and you imagine that Radagast has walked here for decades, mapping the land not on parchment but in memory and instinct. Some say that he carries more knowledge of Greenwood than any elf or man, while others argue that the wizard's influence is subtle, a gentle persuasion rather than domination, letting the wild decide its own course. An old hollow oak leans at an impossible angle, and you step inside the shadow beneath its boughs, where moss feels like velvet against your fingers, discovering tiny runes carved so finely that you doubt anyone but Radagast, or perhaps an equally patient elf, could have etched them. He pauses, squinting at the inscriptions, murmuring a soft correction, and you sense the echo of forgotten lore. Dwarves once believed certain tree carvings could ward off minor spirits, a belief long abandoned, yet perhaps rooted in some kernel of truth. The trail twists upward, leading you toward a ridge where wind plays melodies through pine needles, and Radagast points to a distant peak, explaining that this path skirts lands shadowed by Dol Guldur, a place the wise avoid when possible. Yet he treads carefully, balancing curiosity with caution. A faint scent of herbs drifts from the hillside, marshmallow root, thyme, and something subtler, older, perhaps the lingering trace of a spell cast to protect wandering creatures, and you reach instinctively for your notebook, imagining the catalog Radagast keeps, written not with ink, but with memory. Birds circle above in lazy arcs, their cries forming a chorus that only the wizard seems to understand, and he smiles faintly, noting which species are migrating early or late this season. You marvel at the precision, at the silent symphony of life he orchestrates without ever raising his voice. A deer pauses across the stream, ears pricked, eyeing you warily, yet Radagast whispers, and it continues along its way, a lesson in trust and patience unfolding before you. You stumble on a patch of stones arranged in an ancient, deliberate pattern, perhaps remnants of a long-forgotten settlement, and you pause, feeling history press lightly against your palms. Scholars argue whether Radagast's pathways are guided by instinct, intelligence, or some subtle foresight granted to the Istari, while others suggest he merely listens better than any of his peers. A small hedgehog waddles across your path, carrying a leaf like a shield, and you stifle a laugh as Radagast gently redirects it toward a safer route, joking that it's the forest's tiniest knight on a noble quest. The sun begins to tilt westward, golden light pooling in the forest glades, and you sense that each step along this unseen path draws you deeper not only into Greenwood, but into the living memory of Radagast himself, a blend of wonder, caution, and quiet joy. The air around you hums with a symphony of wings and whispers, each bird's call carrying messages only Radagast seems to decipher. A warbler trills a cautionary note, while a thrush offers an oddly cheerful melody, and you feel the strange thrill of being a secret witness to this feathered congress. Sunlight dapples the forest floor, painting patterns that shift like living mosaics as you follow the brown wizard, who pauses occasionally to note a scratch on a tree or a flicker of movement in the underbrush, his mind cataloging omens, signs, and the subtle language of Greenwood's denizens. Tiny runes etched in bark catch your eye, almost invisible under lichen, hinting at old agreements between the creatures and the wizard. Agreements that speak of feasts of berries, safe nests, and whispered warnings of predators unseen. You bend down to examine one, brushing away moss with reverent fingers, and feel the faint hum of magic lingering, as though the forest itself remembers the promises made here long ago. Radagast hums softly, an elvish tune almost forgotten even in Rivendell, calming a nervous flock above. The melody carries a faint trace of an obscure tidbit you remember reading once, that some elves believed birds' songs could reveal the turning of fate, a notion dismissed by scholars but perhaps partially true. As you continue, a sudden rustle in the underbrush startles a hedgehog, which scurries off carrying a leaf almost as large as its own body, and you laugh quietly, imagining the creature delivering an urgent message in the same manner Radagast has trained them, a whimsical experiment often leading to more amusement than utility. Further along, the wizard pauses before a stone circle hidden beneath brambles, and you feel the weight of ancient design. Some claim these stones mark ley lines, currents of unseen energy, while others argue they are remnants of dwarven surveying tools, lost to time and memory. The birds around you become almost frenzied, their voices layering atop one another, and Radagast listens intently, responding in soft whistles and clicks. You realize you are witnessing the intersection of prophecy and instinct, a delicate balance that few could ever hope to read. One robin alights on Radagast's shoulder, pecking gently at his cloak as though offering counsel, and you are struck by the peculiar intimacy of wizard and wild, a relationship founded on patience, respect, and a subtle humor that sneaks through even in dire circumstances. A squirrel pauses atop a nearby branch, tail flicking, seemingly judging your worthiness to continue along this path. And Radagast whispers a joke in response, something about how squirrels are notoriously poor historians but excellent gossipers, eliciting a soft smile from you. Beneath the leaves, tiny carvings hint at prophecies buried in code, messages that only the brown wizard's keen eye can untangle. Some scholars debate whether he foresaw the movements of dark forces in Middle-earth, while others believe he merely followed instinct sharpened over decades. A breeze carries a mixture of scents, pine resin, damp soil, and the faint sweetness of wildflowers long past their peak. It is a reminder that time in Greenwood flows differently, marking years not by clocks, but by the turning of seasons and the subtle rhythms of life itself. As you step carefully past a brook glinting like molten silver, a raven's sharp caw pierces the soft symphony, and you feel a thrill of recognition. The forest alive with intelligence, both mundane and arcane, yet always humming with the brown wizard's quiet presence. Radagast pauses, brushing his staff along the stones, and you hear the faintest echo of a song carried from the forest's heart. A song that speaks of things forgotten, lessons learned, and the unending, patient weaving of fate. You marvel at the intricate dance of creature and wizard, magic and memory, and consider the debate that persists in scholarly circles. Did Radagast influence the forest? Or did the forest shape him in ways no mortal or immortal fully understands? And as you take in the chorus of wings, leaves, and water, you laugh softly at the thought that the forest probably tells better jokes than any council in Minas Tirith. You follow Radagast deeper into the forest, where the shadows grow longer and the songs of birds mingle with the occasional low murmur of creatures unseen. And you quickly realize that this is a place where etiquette is measured in tail flicks, hoof taps, and rustling leaves rather than words. Squirrels leap from branch to branch, observing your every move, while a family of badgers peers cautiously from their den, sniffing the air as if questioning your intentions. And you can't help but chuckle at the thought that even the smallest creature carries a sense of judgment sharper than many a court in men or elves. Radagast kneels to adjust a fallen twig, murmuring softly in a language that seems almost like a song, and immediately a pair of foxes emerge from behind a thicket, bowing their heads in what you can only describe as respectful acknowledgement, or perhaps mild amusement at your clumsiness. He whispers to them, and they scurry ahead, clearing the path of obstacles in a delicate choreography that has clearly taken decades to perfect. You notice that each movement, each word, carries weight. The forest itself seems to pause, listening, and you remember reading that some minor dwarven chronicles mention how the brown wizard once negotiated a temporary truce between wolves and livestock, an event dismissed by most historians but recounted fondly by rural shepherds as the time when the foxes finally learned manners. A gentle rustle signals the arrival of a small owl, which lands gracefully on Radagast's shoulder, and you feel a shiver of awe at how naturally these creatures trust him, as if recognizing a shared understanding beyond words. You take a careful step, mindful of roots and loose stones, and a badger approaches cautiously, sniffing your boot. Radagast chuckles softly and murmurs reassurance, and you realize that patience, empathy, and a touch of humor are the truest tools in this wilderness diplomacy. A faint trail of petals and herbs indicates a path the wizard has prepared for safe passage, marking areas where creatures forage, nest, or play. It is a subtle map that blends magic, instinct, and knowledge, and you find yourself marveling at the intricacy of his unseen network. Somewhere overhead, the wind carries the faint echo of an old elvish lullaby, one so rarely sung that even Rivendell's libraries have only fragments. And you pause, letting the melody wash over you, noticing how Radagast's own hum blends seamlessly, a counterpoint to the forest's rhythm. You stumble upon a shallow stream where frogs croak their own commentary, and a heron fishes with meticulous patience. And Radagast bends to point out a tiny cluster of herbs reputed to ease ailments, remedies so subtle that even some scholars debate their efficacy. Yet Radagast swears by them, weaving knowledge from plants, animals, and observation into a tapestry no book could contain. A faint trail of paw prints suggests a hedgehog has taken a detour, and Radagast notes with quiet amusement that it has likely delivered an urgent message to its neighbors, carrying news of your intrusion with impeccable timing. You realize that even in such seeming chaos, there is order, a rhythm to the interactions, and a subtle hierarchy that you are only beginning to grasp. The brown wizard has mastered a language of gestures, glances, and tiny sounds that allow him to negotiate, mediate, and cajole creatures in ways that no council or mage could replicate. You laugh softly when a squirrel pauses atop a branch, mimicking Radagast's gestures as if attempting diplomacy in miniature. And you note with wonder how he responds with a wink, a click of his tongue, and a whispered phrase in a dialect known only to the forest itself, Scholars debate whether his abilities are innate, a gift of the Istari, or honed by years of patient observation, while some argue that only his empathy, a quiet, enduring patience, is what allows him to mediate the complex politics of fur, feather, and leaf. A gentle drizzle begins, scenting the air with moss and earth, and you follow Radagast under a canopy that shimmers with droplets, feeling an extraordinary serenity. It is in this web of interaction, negotiation, and quiet magic that you begin to understand the depth of his entanglement with the wild folk, a bond both subtle and profound, woven with humor, patience, and reverence. You step into the heart of Greenwood the Great, where the trees tower impossibly high, their ancient trunks twisted with age and memory, and a hush settles around you, broken only by the gentle sigh of wind through leaves and the distant trickle of a hidden brook. The air is thick with the scent of damp earth, pine resin, and a hint of something older, something almost impossible to name, as if the forest itself breathes history. Radagast moves with a quiet grace, staff tapping lightly on gnarled roots. You notice the subtle changes in the ground, moss patterns forming runes, bark etched with nearly forgotten symbols, and a faint glow where fungi cluster in secret hollows. Every step seems deliberate, as if the forest is guiding you toward revelations hidden from all but the most attentive wanderers, and you marvel at the wizard's ability to read these subtle cues with almost uncanny precision. A squirrel scuttles past, carrying a bundle of acorns, and Radagast bends to murmur to it softly, drawing a delicate chuckle from you as he jokes that even the smallest creature here takes its duties seriously, perhaps more so than some of the counselors in Minas Tirith. You come upon a clearing where sunlight spills in like molten gold, revealing stones arranged in a faint circle, their surfaces etched with patterns that hum faintly under your fingertips. Some say these stones mark a place where the forest's oldest spirits linger, a concept debated by scholars who either dismiss it as superstition or regard it as a subtle truth of Middle-earth. Radagast kneels beside the circle, pointing out tiny carvings of leaves, birds, and other creatures, whispering that these symbols preserve knowledge of seasons, migrations, and the secret habits of beings most folk never notice. You catch the faint aroma of herbs long thought lost, and he explains their properties, some for healing, some for enhancing sight or hearing in the forest, and a few so potent that their use is whispered about only in hushed tones. A distant rustle draws your attention to a pair of owls perched silently, watching, and you feel a thrill at their awareness, sensing that the creatures of Greenwood share a collective intelligence, subtle yet keen, guided by Radagast's long stewardship. You brush against an ancient oak whose bark is gnarled with age, feeling a warmth beneath your fingers, almost as if the tree itself remembers the comings and goings of countless generations. Dwarves once claimed that such trees could whisper truths to those who listened with patience, and though most dismiss this, you feel the faintest echo of meaning in the air. Somewhere nearby, a fox emerges, pauses, and seems to nod in acknowledgement of Radagast before disappearing into undergrowth. A gentle reminder that every creature here knows its part in the intricate web of the forest. A faint, almost imperceptible shimmer along a root hints at a hidden passage, one that Radagast explains leads to subterranean hollows, secret streams, and forgotten caches of herbs and fungi. Knowledge preserved through careful observation and centuries of wandering. The wind carries a faint elvish chant, soft and melodic, a tune that many scholars have forgotten, but that Radagast hums with ease, harmonizing subtly with the murmurs of the forest. It is said that some elves once believed such songs could reveal hidden doors in nature, a notion now largely forgotten but perhaps not entirely without merit. You step carefully along the moss-lined path, noticing the subtle interplay of shadow and light, sound and silence. And you realize that every element of the old forest is a living archive, and that Radagast's intimate understanding of it is both a legacy and a lesson. That true wisdom often comes from listening rather than commanding. As you follow him, you smile at his whispered joke about teaching a hedgehog to read star charts, realizing that even in the most serious of endeavors, the brown wizard preserves a lightness of heart, an understanding that play and observation are inseparable companions. Somewhere deeper, the forest hums faintly with magic, the secret pulse of greenwood that Radagast knows better than any scholar or mage. And you can't help but wonder at the balance of knowledge, instinct, and humility required to navigate its hidden wonders. Feeling both awe and a soft, lingering peace settle over your shoulders. As you follow Radagast along a narrow, overgrown ridge, the sunlight fades and the air grows heavier, tinged with a scent of smoke and decay carried faintly from distant lands. And you feel a shiver of unease as the forest's melody changes, soft whispers of warning hidden in the rustle of leaves. Ahead, Dol Guldur looms, dark and silent, a shadow upon the horizon, its silhouette jagged against the late afternoon sky. And you realize that the forest here does not entirely belong to you or the wizard. Something older, something vigilant, seems to watch. Radagast pauses, leaning lightly on his staff, his gaze steady yet filled with a subtle tension. And you notice the faint flicker of his cloak, as if it has absorbed centuries of whispers, warnings, and counsel. A raven circles high above, cawing sharply, and he chuckles softly, remarking that even these birds debate which path a traveler should take. A light joke in the face of the palpable darkness, yet his voice carries the weight of experience. You step closer to the edge of the ridge, the wind whipping through your hair, carrying the distant cries of wolves, and you feel the pulse of history in every gust, recalling tales that speak of Dol Guldur as the seat of shadow, a place even Gandalf approached with caution. Radagast bends to touch a low-hanging branch, murmuring a few words in an almost forgotten elvish dialect, and the leaves stir as if acknowledging his presence, a subtle signal that the brown wizard moves with respect, not dominance. You notice a faint trail of feathers leading toward the forest edge, perhaps left by a messenger bird or some creature attuned to secrets, and you feel the thrill of silent communication, an exchange that carries warnings long before they reach human ears. Scholars debate the extent of Radagast's foresight, some claiming he predicted the rise of darkness in Dol Guldur with uncanny precision, while others argue he merely reacted with prudence guided by instinct honed over decades. Either way, the wisdom is palpable as he steps forward. A fox emerges from a thicket, pausing as if to observe your courage, tail flicking, and Radagast whispers a joke about how even the foxes prefer diplomacy over heroics, prompting a quiet laugh that eases the tension clinging to your shoulders. You notice the ground here bears traces of old battles, scorched earth, broken twigs, and faint impressions that speak of long-past skirmishes between shadow and light. And Radagast explains, almost wistfully, that many of these traces are warnings, lessons written in soil rather than parchment. A soft murmur of wind carries a faint scent of herbs and flowers, unexpectedly sweet, a reminder that even in the shadow of Dol Guldur, life persists, delicate and defiant, weaving a fragile harmony amid looming peril. You bend to examine a stone marked with faint runes, a symbol perhaps of protection or remembrance, and Radagast hums a low tune, one said to soothe even the most troubled spirits. The melody blends with the forest's whispers, offering reassurance that wisdom and vigilance walk hand in hand. The trees here are gnarled and massive, their roots forming labyrinths that twist across the earth. And you sense that the brown wizard knows these woods as both protector and mediator, bridging the tension between shadow and life with quiet, deliberate care. Birds call from the branches, a mixture of alarm and curiosity, and Radagast responds with soft whistles and gentle hums, guiding them with subtle authority that never overpowers, a delicate balance of command and trust. You feel a chill not entirely of cold, a mixture of awe and unease, as you contemplate the hidden forces at play. And you note with fascination the scholarly debate. Did Radagast's subtle interventions at Dol Guldur alter the course of events? Or did fate merely allow him to tread safely along its edges? A lone deer steps into a clearing, ears pricked, and Radagast whispers a joke about it being the forest's secret sentry, eliciting a smile that lightens the tension just enough to remind you of the quiet humor threading through even the darkest of paths. As shadows lengthen and the air thickens with expectancy, you realize that you are walking not just through a forest, but through living history, a narrative of caution, courage, and careful observation, with Radagast as your guide, interpreting the silent language of Greenwood and the subtle tremors of Dol Guldur itself. You follow Radagast through a narrow glade where the sunlight filters in fractured beams, illuminating patches of moss, wildflowers, and the occasional creature that pauses to watch your passage, and you realize that even here, in this hidden corner of Middle-earth, every step carries consequence. The air is tinged with faint aromas of herbs, fermented berries, and something sharper, an almost metallic tang hinting at alchemical processes quietly underway. And you can't help but wonder what secrets the brown wizard has coaxed from leaf, root, and feather. Ahead, a circle of stones encircles a tiny clearing, their surfaces etched with symbols that hum faintly when touched, and you sense an unusual intensity radiating from the site. Some whisper that Radagast once experimented here with merging subtle enchantments of flora and fauna, a practice frowned upon by the White Council, yet fascinating in its audacity. A rabbit freezes nearby, ears twitching, as Radagast kneels to place a tiny crystal atop a moss-covered stump. He murmurs in an elvish dialect so soft you can barely hear it, and the forest seems to lean closer, listening, waiting for the results of an unseen ritual. You notice a faint shimmer in the air, like heat rising from a sunlit stone, and it is difficult to discern whether it is magic, natural phenomena, or the deliberate touch of the wizard's skill, a mystery that has long intrigued scholars debating the limits of Istari influence. A bird alights on a low branch, pecking gently at an herb that Radagast has arranged in intricate patterns, and he jokes quietly that the bird is the true arbiter of success, eliciting a soft laugh as the creature hops imperiously across the circle. You step lightly to avoid disturbing a cluster of glowing fungi, whose luminescence seems to pulse in rhythm with the wizard's low chant, and a subtle hum of life, magical, mundane, or both, threads through the glade like an invisible symphony. Radagast lifts a vial filled with a swirling mixture of petals, crushed bark, and a few delicate feathers, whispering the instructions almost as if speaking to the forest itself. You marvel at the precision, the patience, and the absolute trust he places in both the land and the creatures inhabiting it. A fox observes from the edge of the clearing, tail flicking, and you note with amusement the tiny gestures of approval Radagast bestows, as if negotiating consent with every being present. Some historians debate the ethics of his experiments, claiming that even minor interventions in nature could have unforeseen consequences, while others argue that Radagast's work preserved knowledge and harmony that would have otherwise been lost to shadow and time. You watch as a hedgehog cautiously approaches, nudging a small vial, and Radagast whispers a joke about it being the forest's apprentice, prompting a quiet chuckle as you follow his lead. The glade vibrates subtly, almost imperceptibly, as herbs release scents and birds flit in arcs overhead. A delicate choreography of nature and artifice that seems both natural and impossibly precise. You feel a faint thrill as the swirling energies settle, a sense of order emerging from potential chaos, and you recognize the quiet humor in Radagast's eyes. He has attempted what others would call reckless, yet he does so with reverence, understanding, and a touch of mischief. The sun dips lower, casting long shadows that weave through the glade like living threads, and you sense that these hidden experiments, these delicate interactions of magic, life, and instinct, carry both risk and reward, a lesson in patience, observation, and humility that only Radagast could impart. You step back, inhaling the mingled scents of moss, herbs, and a faint trace of lingering magic, realizing that here, in this secret glade, the brown wizard's curiosity is both a light and a burden, a testament to the delicate balance between knowledge and consequence. And you laugh softly at the thought that even in the most serious work, Radagast never loses his gentle wit. You step carefully along a winding path, where the sunlight dances through the canopy in fragmented gold and green, and notice the subtle movements of creatures who have long since learned to trust Radagast, yet watch you with cautious curiosity, as if questioning your worthiness to follow. A family of mice scurries across the mossy floor, carrying tiny seeds, and Radagast bends to murmur softly, drawing them toward the trail without startling them. You chuckle at the sight, imagining these small beings as forest couriers, delivering messages between unseen corners of greenwood. Overhead, a badger pauses on a raised root, its eyes sharp and measuring, and you feel the thrill of being observed by a woodland council whose judgments weigh more than any human decree. Radagast hums a faint tune, an obscure elvish melody he learned perhaps from a wandering minstrel long forgotten by time, and you notice how the animals respond, some tilting their heads, others shuffling closer, drawn by the gentle cadence. A bird swoops past, dropping a small leaf at Radagast's feet, and he whispers a light-hearted remark about it being a tax payment, eliciting a soft laugh from you as the forest itself seems to echo the humor. You follow him into a small glade, where the sun falls in gentle shafts onto a carpet of wildflowers. And here the diversity of life is staggering. Frogs, beetles, birds, and a wary fox coexisting in delicate equilibrium, all subtly guided by Radagast's quiet influence. The wizard kneels to adjust a cluster of herbs, murmuring instructions to a passing squirrel who dutifully moves a fallen berry into a safer location, and you marvel at the intricate choreography of cooperation, trust, and gentle persuasion that has taken decades to cultivate. Somewhere nearby, a stream babbles over stones smoothed by time, carrying reflections of leaves, sky, and occasional ripples caused by dragonflies skimming the surface. You pause to let the serenity wash over you, feeling the subtle pulse of life that courses through every branch and root. Scholars debate whether Radagast's influence is innate, a gift of the Istari, or a skill honed through years of observation. But the truth seems evident as you watch birds, mammals, and even insects respond to his presence with instinctive trust and subtle deference. A hedgehog waddles past, a leaf draped like a cloak across its back, and Radagast whispers a joke about it being the forest's secret night, prompting you to stifle a laugh as you follow the whimsical yet purposeful procession. You pause near a fallen log, noting the tiny carvings, ancient runes depicting seasons, migration, and weather patterns that only a brown wizard's eye could read, and Radagast hums softly, noting subtle changes, whispering that the animals carry knowledge as well as the plants. And sometimes the smallest being understands more than the tallest elf or tallest man. A fox peeks from behind a bramble, watching silently, and Radagast gestures, and it moves to the path ahead, clearing the way, a silent acknowledgement of shared understanding. You notice how the sunlight catches the dew on a spider's web, refracting faint rainbows onto mossy stones, and you think of the countless moments of observation, trial, and gentle guidance that have allowed Radagast to forge these alliances. Somewhere in the underbrush, an owl blinks knowingly, and you realize that these allies, large and small, are more than companions. They are teachers, messengers, and reminders that even in the vastness of Middle-earth, cooperation and empathy are often mightier than spells or swords. You breathe deeply, inhaling the mingled scents of earth, leaves, and subtle magic, and chuckle quietly at the thought that the forest is perhaps more organized than many of the councils in Minas Tirith, its governance enforced not with laws, but with trust, patience, and a touch of gentle humor only a brown wizard could wield. You follow Radagast along a narrow, winding path that leads deeper into Greenwood the Great, where the canopy thickens and the light grows soft and dappled, revealing patches of moss, mushrooms, and the occasional glimmer of hidden life. The forest seems to recognize your presence, bending subtly around your steps while whispering secrets of ages past. Ahead, a glade opens like a secret chamber, sunlight spilling through the leaves in gentle beams that catch dust motes and flying insects, creating an almost sacred aura, and you feel the hush of reverence, as if the forest itself holds its breath. In the center, a circle of stones surrounds a small pool, water clear and still, reflecting the sky and canopy with uncanny precision, and Radagast kneels beside it murmuring softly to the flora and fauna that gather nearby, from birds perched silently on branches to a fox watching with intelligent curiosity. Herbs and plants, many rare and forgotten, grow in deliberate arrangements, their placement whispering of careful study, observation, and a deep communion with the earth. Some flowers bloom only under specific conditions. Some roots exude faintly magical scents, and you realize that each element has a story, a purpose, a reason for being tended so meticulously. Radagast hums softly, an elvish tune nearly lost to memory, and the birds respond in melody, creating a chorus that seems to echo through time, linking the present moment with ancient practices, forgotten rituals, and long-vanished guardians of the land. You notice a hollowed tree nearby, filled with notes, sketches, and small charms, all catalogued with a care that suggests centuries of observation and reflection. Some contain remedies for ailments, some document unusual behaviors of animals, and others record subtle changes in the weather and forest rhythms, a private archive of knowledge that few outside Greenwood could ever hope to comprehend. A small rabbit pauses in the undergrowth, ears twitching, and Radagast whispers a light-hearted comment, joking that it is likely the forest's secret librarian, tasked with cataloging every leaf and blade of grass. And you can't help but laugh quietly, caught up in the gentle humor threading through the wizard's careful routines. The pool reflects clouds drifting across the sky above, and you see the faint ripple of movement as a frog hops delicately at the water's edge. Radagast points out the subtle signs that indicate changes in the forest, teaching you that knowledge often comes not from books or scrolls, but from patient observation and respectful attention. Scholars debate the ethical limits of his secluded experiments, some claiming that seclusion allows for untamed genius, while others warn of the dangers of knowledge unshared. Yet here, in this hidden refuge, you feel the balance of curiosity and care, mischief and wisdom, all perfectly intertwined. A faint scent of pine, earth, and lingering herbs envelops you, mingling with the sound of wind through leaves and the gentle murmur of a hidden stream. And you realize that this is a place not only of study and observation, but of reflection, patience, and quiet renewal. Radagast moves among the plants, birds, and small mammals with the ease of one who has spent decades cultivating trust, humor, and harmony. You watch as a squirrel delivers a small nut to a waiting badger, and he whispers a joke about forest taxes being paid on time, prompting a soft laugh and easing the tension of your long journey. The sunlight fades slowly, casting elongated shadows and painting the glade in golden warmth, and you feel the profound serenity of a place both secret and sacred, a space preserved not by walls, but by attention, care, and the quiet influence of a wizard devoted to understanding rather than conquest. You breathe deeply, letting the forest's rhythm seep into your own, and notice that even in the stillness, life thrives in countless subtle forms, a testament to the patient work of the Brown Wizard and the hidden, often overlooked allies of Greenwood the Great. You step quietly along a winding forest trail as twilight settles over Greenwood the Great, the golden light softening into cool indigo, and the scent of pine, moss, and faintly blooming herbs fills your senses, mingling with the gentle hush of the woods as night begins its slow, deliberate descent. Radagast walks beside you, staff tapping lightly on the soft earth, guiding you through glades and across streams that reflect the faint shimmer of stars above. Each movement carries the patience, wisdom, and quiet humor that have marked his journeys for decades. Birds roost silently in the branches, their calls dwindling to occasional rustles, and small creatures, hedgehogs, squirrels, foxes, move carefully through undergrowth, their habits subtly attuned to the presence of the Brown Wizard. The forest feels alive, humming softly with unseen life, and you notice how every leaf, every pebble, and every whisper of wind seems to carry echoes of lessons learned, experiments conducted, and trust earned over countless seasons. You pause beside a small river, listening to the water babble over smooth stones, reflecting the silver of starlight, and you breathe deeply, feeling the pulse of life that Radagast has tended with reverent attention, a network of allies and wisdom as delicate as it is enduring. His hidden refuge, the glade where rare herbs grow and forgotten melodies linger, comes to mind. Here, Radagast's legacy is not measured in fame or recorded feats, but in the quiet flourishing of the forest and the subtle understanding he imparts to all who observe and listen. As you follow him to the forest's edge, the glow of fireflies begins to twinkle like soft lanterns, and you marvel at the harmony between creatures, plants, and wizardly care, noting with gentle amusement that even a misplaced acorn can spark a chain of events observed and corrected with patience and subtle humor. The wind carries the faintest tune of an elvish song, long thought lost, and Radagast hums in gentle counterpoint, creating a quiet lullaby for the forest itself, a reminder that magic is often a matter of presence and attention rather than grand gestures or loud proclamations. You settle on a mossy bank beside the stream, the stars reflected in the rippling water above, and watch as the forest breathes around you. A hedgehog pads softly along the bank, a fox curls in the shadows, and the soft rustle of leaves forms a soothing rhythm, almost like the slow cadence of a heartbeat. The lessons of Greenwood, Dol Guldur, and the hidden glades, of patience, observation, and empathy, sink into your mind with the calm inevitability of twilight, and you realize that Radagast's legacy is both tangible and ephemeral, preserved in every fluttering wing, every careful paw step, and every whispered chant, that harmonizes with the ancient pulse of the world. As night deepens, the stream murmurs softly, the glow of distant fireflies flickers, and the hush of the forest invites you to rest. You feel a profound serenity, the quiet joy of having witnessed the subtle genius of the brown wizard. And you allow your thoughts to drift with the water, the leaves, and the stars, embracing the gentle closure of a story steeped in wonder, patience, and reverence. The forest exhales, the night settles, and the legacy of feather, fur, leaf, and wisdom endures, quiet but unbroken, leaving you with a sense of peace, a smile, and the gentle knowing that some truths are preserved in silence, observation, and the soft magic that weaves through Greenwood the Great.